You ever stop and wonder how your local community actually works? I mean, who decides to fix that pothole on your street? Or who runs the local market? Who even names the streets? Well, it pretty much all comes down to one thing: money. So in this explainer, we're going to follow the money. We're going to pull back the curtain on how your local government in Nigeria gets its cash, and maybe more importantly, who gets to decide how it's spent. I mean, just think about your day-to-day life, right? The motor park you might use, or the process of registering a new baby, even something as basic as getting your trash collected. All of these things, they're managed by your local council. And, none of it is free. Someone has to pay for it. And that's really what brings us to the big questions we're digging into today. Where does all that money come from, and who really gets the final say on how it's used? Okay, so if we want to understand how our communities tick, we've got to do what they always say: follow the money. So our first stop on this journey is income. Think of it like a household budget. First, you have to know where the money is coming from. Let's break down the main ways cash actually flows into your local council's bank account. All right, the biggest piece of the pie, by a long shot, comes right from the very top. Take a look at this number: 20.60%. So what is that? Well, that's the share of Nigeria's entire national revenue. We're talking about the Federation account that is legally guaranteed to go straight to all 774 local governments. And listen, for a lot of these councils, this money isn't just a part of their budget, it's their absolute lifeline. But, that big chunk of federal money is only one part of the story. It gets combined with another 10% from the state's own revenue, and together, that forms the biggest slice of the pie. We call these statutory allocations. But councils aren't just sitting around waiting for handouts. Nope. They also generate their own cash from two other mainstreams, which have some interesting names: permissive sources and incidental sources. So let's dig into what those really mean. So what in the world are these permissive sources? Well, this is the money that's generated right there in your own neighborhood. It's stuff you see every day. Think about the fees you pay for a marriage certificate, or the rates that local shops and kiosks have to pay, the levies on market stalls, or even the permit for a big signboard. Every single time money is collected for one of these local services, it's going directly into the council's pot. Okay, so the money's in the bank, great. But really, that's just the start of it. The next big question is, who are the gatekeepers? Who's holding the purse strings? Who actually gets to decide if your road gets paved or if the local primary school gets a new roof? It's time to meet the key players who manage all this money. So, right at the heart of this whole setup is a classic separation of powers. And it's all designed for checks and balances, right? On one side, you've got the executive arm. This is led by the chairman. Their job is to come up with the plan, to create the budget, and say, here's how I think we should spend the money. But, and this is a huge but, they can't just do whatever they want. On the other side, you have the legislative arm. These are your elected counselors, and they hold the power to look at that plan, to question it, and in the end, to approve it or not. And this creates this really important dynamic, a kind of push and pull. The chairman is like the CEO. They initiate the financial decisions, they draft the budget. But the council legislator, they're meant to be the people's watchdogs. They're the ones who debate, who can change things, and who give the final yes or no on the budget. They even have the power to override a chairman's veto if they can get a 2/3 vote. And here's a crucial point. Their job isn't over once the budget is passed. They're also supposed to be monitoring how everything is being implemented. They're meant to be keeping an eye on things. Now, the chairman and the counselors, they aren't in this alone. They have a super important professional advisor, the treasurer. The easiest way to think of the treasurer is like the council's CFO, or chief financial officer. This person isn't an elected politician. They're a career professional. Their job is to give financial advice, make sure all the money that's supposed to come in actually comes in, and they're one of the people who has to sign the checks. In a perfect world, they are the non-political guardian of the council's money. Okay, we've seen where the money comes from, and we've met the people in charge of it. Now for, let's be honest, the most interesting part: where does the money actually go? Let's follow the trail of cash as it goes out the door and see what it's actually being spent on. So generally, all the spending falls into two big buckets. First, you have your day-to-day running costs. This is often called recurrent expenditure. Basically, it's what it takes to keep the lights on: paying staff salaries, putting petrol in the vehicles, maintaining buildings. You get the idea. Then you have the second bucket, capital expenditure. And this is the big stuff. These are the long-term investments that actually build and improve the community, like constructing a brand new road or building a market. And here's a really interesting, kind of quirky detail about how government accounting works that's totally different from the private sector. See, if a company builds a new office, they list it as an asset on their books for years and years. But a local government, they write off the entire cost of a big project in the very same year it's finished. So that brand new clinic they just built, the next year, on paper, it has a book value of 0. It's a huge difference in how public assets are accounted for. So with all this money moving around, from the federal government all the way down to local projects, you have to ask, how do you keep the system honest? How do you prevent waste, or worse, corruption? Well, that brings us to the all-important rulebook, the systems and controls that are designed to keep everything in check. The absolute cornerstone for all of this financial control is a document called the Financial Memoranda. The best way to think of it is as the official operating manual, or maybe even the constitution, for all local government finance in Nigeria. It's a document from the federal government, and it lays out everything in detail: the exact procedures for budgeting, how to collect revenue, the specific jobs of every officer, and even what happens if you break the rules. And believe me, this rulebook gets super specific. For instance, it sets hard limits on how much money key officials can spend all by themselves. Let's take an example. In a council that brings in over 2 million naira on its own, the chairman cannot, on his own authority, approve any spending over 250,000 naira. If something costs more than that, it needs more signatures, more approvals, more scrutiny. It's basically a built-in brake pedal to stop any one person from making big financial decisions without oversight. And the controls don't just stop inside the council walls. Oh no, there are multiple layers of external oversight too. You've got the state and national assemblies keeping an eye on things. The state government itself is watching. There's an auditor general whose whole job is to audit the local government's books. And then, and this might be the most important layer of all, there's public scrutiny. And yeah, that's you. That's where you come in. All right, so we've walked through the whole system, at least how it works on paper, right? We've seen where the money comes from, who the decision makers are, and the rules that are supposed to keep everyone accountable. But, and this is the big question, if the system is so clearly laid out, why do we so often see a gap between the plan and what's actually happening on our streets? Well, this is where the theory smacks right into the real world. The reality is, the system on paper runs into some massive practical challenges. For one, many councils really struggle to generate their own local revenue, which makes them super dependent on those government allocations, which, by the way, can often be delayed. On top of that, they can't just go out and get a loan for a big project. They need permission for that. And all of this is happening while costs for everything are going up, and the population keeps growing, demanding more and more resources. And that really brings us right back to the beginning. The whole system, as we've seen, is designed with checks, with balances, and with a specific written-in role for public scrutiny. So now that you know how the money is supposed to flow, all the way from the federal level right down to your neighborhood, you now have the power to start asking the right questions. So we'll leave you with this to think about. Knowing what you know now, what is the citizen's role, what is your role in making sure that money actually builds a better community for everyone?